Okay, be honest with me. Have you been studying English for years, but the absolute second you actually have to open your mouth and speak, you just freeze? Seriously, if your heart starts racing when someone asks you a super simple question, listen, you are definitely not alone. Today, we're tearing down this massive, completely exhausting lie that fluency requires some $1,000 course, a private tutor, or, I don't know, packing up your entire life and moving to London. Welcome to The Explainer. We're unlocking the blueprint to self-taught fluency. And I promise you, literally every tool you actually need is probably sitting right there on your desk right now.
So, let's just tackle the elephant in the room right away. Do you really need a teacher? I know, it's a provocative question, right? It kind of challenges everything we've ever been taught. For our whole lives, the traditional school system has basically conditioned us to rely on grades, strict classrooms, and authority figures to validate what we learn. We're literally programmed to think, well, if I don't have a teacher guiding my every single move, I'm going to fail. But out in the real world, there are thousands of independent, self-taught polyglots absolutely shattering this myth every single day. They're mastering speaking, listening, and vocabulary completely on their own. It just proves that fluency isn't some premium product you have to buy from a fancy institution.
You see, the myth tells us we just have to sit around patiently waiting for the perfect teacher, or this magical, immersive environment, or enough money to finally go live abroad. But the reality? It's so much simpler. Your smartphone gives you access to way more global English content today than a student living right in the middle of New York City had 30 years ago. Seriously, you've got podcasts, international news, thousands of videos, and native speakers available 24/7. Everything you need to cross that bridge from intermediate to fluent is quite literally right at your fingertips. The challenge isn't finding the resources anymore, guys. It's entirely about how you actually use them.
Which brings us to step 1. Own your journey. If there's one absolutely crucial mindset shift that's going to completely alter your trajectory here, it's taking total, absolute responsibility for your own learning. Think about going to the gym, right? A personal trainer can hand you this fantastic workout plan, show you the absolute perfect form, and cheer you on from the sidelines. But at the end of the day, the trainer cannot lift the weights for you. You gotta sweat. You have to do the heavy lifting yourself. And language learning is the exact same mechanism. No app, no prestigious course, and no teacher can magically download English into your brain. They can only point the way. Waiting around for some shiny new app to fix your English is, honestly, a guaranteed way to just stay stuck. The actual acquisition comes entirely from your own daily effort.
Let's look at it this way. Consider the dependent learner. This is a person who's always blaming their old high school, their crazy schedule, or their local environment. They're basically paralyzed, just forever waiting for the perfect circumstances to finally start studying. Now contrast that with the responsible learner. This person faces the exact same exhausting challenges, the same chaotic workdays, but instead of making excuses, they create these little pockets of opportunity. They're constantly asking, okay, what's the next small step I can take today? Fast forward 1 year, and who do you think actually sees improvement? It's always the responsible learner for sure. Because responsibility creates action, and action is the only thing that creates real improvement.
All right, moving right along to step 2, build a simple daily routine.
So now that we've got our mindset right, we need to pivot from theory to tactical, everyday habit building. A lot of eager learners make this huge, fatal mistake of relying entirely on motivation. You know the type? They wait until Sunday, suddenly feel this massive burst of inspiration, study intensely for 4 straight hours, and then, boom, they completely burn out. They wake up on Monday with a headache, totally resenting the English language, and don't look at it again for a week. Compare that to someone who studies for just 30 minutes every single day. Look, language learning is exactly like brushing your teeth. You don't just brush your teeth for 5 hours on Sunday and skip the rest of the week, right? Consistency will absolutely always beat intensity. Tiny daily habits outlast fleeting motivation every single time.
So what does a realistic, completely stress-free routine actually look like? Well, here's a beautifully simple breakdown. 10 minutes of listening, 10 minutes of reading, 10 minutes of speaking practice. That's it. The whole shebang, 30 minutes. Setting a routine this incredibly specific removes all that dreaded decision fatigue that totally kills progress. You eliminate the daily stress of waking up and going, oh, what should I study today? You don't have to decide. You just wake up, look at your plan, and execute. It's small enough that you won't get overwhelmed and quit after 3 days, but it's consistent enough to create massive, unstoppable momentum over time.
And hey, if your brain is tricking you into thinking a measly 30 minutes isn't enough time to actually make a difference, let's do the math real quick. 30 minutes a day adds up to 3.5 hours a week. That becomes over 15 hours a month. And over a single year, that is a massive 180 hours of highly focused, consistent practice. think about what you could achieve with 180 hours. Fluency isn't built in one magical overnight cramming session. True fluency is built through hundreds of ordinary, seemingly boring 30-minute sessions just compounding quietly over time.
Let's dive into step 3. Learn through daily listening.
Listen, if you could only pick one single skill to practice every single day, it absolutely should be listening. Why? Because listening is the ultimate multi-tool. It simultaneously boosts your vocabulary, dials in your pronunciation, and solidifies your grasp of natural grammar patterns all at once. It trains your brain to recognize how real people actually speak, rather than how a textbook thinks they speak. But, you gotta be patient. I love this quote from the source material: "Language learning is like planting a tree. You don't just plant a seed on Monday and furiously demand to sit in its shade on Tuesday, right? You have to water it every day. You might not see that daily microscopic growth, but if you keep watering it, if you keep listening, eventually the growth becomes undeniable. Suddenly, without even realizing how, you just start understanding more."
Okay, so how should you actually listen to get these incredible results? You're going to want to apply the 3-pass listening technique. Please, whatever you do, don't try to understand every single word on your first try. That just leads to massive frustration. On pass 1, just relax. Listen for the overall main idea. Just get the gist of the story. On pass 2, zoom in a bit. Now you're actively noticing some new words, maybe catching expressions you missed before, figuring out context. And then on pass 3, shift your focus entirely away from the meaning and strictly pay attention to the rhythm, the intonation, and the pronunciation. Notice how they blend words together. This repeated layered strategy literally turns a confusing 5-minute audio clip into a masterclass for your ears.
Next up, step 4, read easy content regularly.
Reading is incredible, but man, there is a massive trap here that so many intermediate learners fall right into. They try to read material that is way, way too advanced, like heavy classic literature or dense academic papers. They spend the entire time just staring at a dictionary, get completely overwhelmed, and quit. Instead, you need to start with manageable weights. Bringing back our gym analogy from earlier, you wouldn't confidently strut into a gym on day 1, walk up to the bench press, and try to lift 300 pounds. You'd crush yourself. You start with what you can comfortably handle. With English, simple stories, beginner-friendly articles, and straightforward daily news are exactly what your brain needs. When the content is actually understandable, your brain processes and acquires the language so much more efficiently.
Honestly, reading is essentially a cheat code for fluency. Instead of painfully memorizing some boring list of random, totally disconnected vocabulary words, reading lets see words securely connected to meaningful ideas. You absorb the grammar completely naturally just by seeing the rules in action over and over again. And over time, because you're constantly exposing your brain to properly structured paragraphs, your own writing naturally improves without any extra effort. Plus, if you choose to read about topics you actually enjoy, like sports, tech, psychology, travel, whatever, you build this incredible momentum because you actually care about what happens on the next page.
Finally, step 5, think directly in English.
All right, we made it to the final boss of language learning. This is all about breaking that exhausting, progress-killing habit of translating everything in your head before you speak. When you translate, think about what's happening. You think of this complex idea in your native language, you desperately search your brain for the English equivalents, you stress over the grammar rules, and then finally you speak with hesitation and delay. It is mentally exhausting. It's literally like driving a car with a broken engine where you constantly have to stop, put it in park, and restart. But when you think directly in English, you just see an idea, an image, or a concept, and you instantly produce the English language. The communication is smooth, fast, and natural. This right here is the ultimate hallmark of true fluency.
And the absolute best part? You do not need a massive vocabulary of 10,000 words to start doing this. You can start right now, today, with the incredibly simple words you already know. In fact, I challenge you to do it right now while you're watching this explainer. Just look around the room you're in, don't translate, just point your eyes at things and think to yourself, that is a chair. The window is open. My phone is on the table. I know, it seems incredibly basic, right? But every single time you do this, you are actively training that muscle in your brain to operate entirely within the English ecosystem. You are completely bypassing that clunky translation engine. So there you have it, your empowered English blueprint. We've successfully covered the entire journey today. You now know that you have to take absolute ownership. You know you need a simple, stress-free 30-minute daily routine. You know that listening is your best multi-tool, that reading easy content is your secret weapon, and that thinking directly in English is the ultimate goal. You don't need to wait for anyone's permission, and you certainly don't need to wait for the perfect teacher to magically appear and save you. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought.
You have the tools, you have the blueprint, but knowing the path isn't the same as walking it. Knowledge without action is basically just entertainment. The power to become fluent is entirely in your hands right now. So ask yourself, what is the next small step you can take today? Don't wait for a burst of motivation tomorrow. Take that tiny step, start your 30-minute routine, and own your journey. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.